Within the phylum Ascomycota, we have fungi that are producing ascospores. Now, similar to the phylum Basidiomycota, which produce basidiospores, the ascomycotan fungi are going to produce ascospores. Now, there are 5 different types of main ascospores, and depending on which fungi we're talking about, there will be a specific type of ascospore. There's no specific relationship between what type of fungi will produce what kind of ascospore. And when we start talking about septation and nuclei, there is also no true relation between the nuclei and septation. So first, before we start talking about the different type of ascospores, we have to understand how septation occurs. So usually, most commonly actually, septation is the result of, it's the result of leftover actin filaments, microtubules that are left over from mitosis. So remember in mitosis, when we're pulling apart those chromosomes via the different types of filaments or microtubules, some may be left behind in the end when mitosis is over. And that can actually be used to create the septation within a cell. Now, jumping into the most simplest type of ascospore, we start off with the amerospore, which essentially is a single cell, which is going to have the nuclei inside. Most commonly, we'll have 2 nuclei, and they're both going to be haploid. And it has no septation. Here we can see that the amerospore can have different shapes, but there's no septation. Now, if we look at the didymospores, we can see that we have different types of shapes, but there is a single septation, which results in 2 compartments. And that's kind of where the word didymo comes from, because di means 2, and we have 2 compartments. So we're going to have a didymospore. Now, a didymospore can be tetranucleated, which means it has 4 nuclei. But in reality, there's going to be 2 nuclei in each compartment because that's what we see most commonly. And overall, it's going to be tetranucleate. Most commonly, it's 2 nuclei, but we can have maybe 1 nuclei in each compartment, or 2 in one compartment and 1 in another compartment. Next up, we have the phragmospores, and the phragmospores are essentially these ascospores that are multiseptate. So in a way they're fragmented, so they're phragmospores, and they contain these multiple compartments. Now they can be erect or they can be slightly bent, but essentially it's just these various compartments, and each compartment will have its own nuclei. Now, taking it one step further, we can have dictyospores. Now, dictyospores are essentially are irregular fragmentation. So over here we can see the irregular septation. So over here we can see the septation is parallel. So if we have the ascospore going in this direction, the septation occurs parallel, not perpendicular. And if we have non-parallel septation, so if we have some sort of irregular septation, we will get a dictyospore. So a phragmospore essentially, a dictyospore essentially builds upon a phragmospore. And then lastly, we have the scolicospores, which are these long, slender ascospores, which can be aseptate or they can be septate. It depends on which fungi we're talking about. And that is essentially the different types of ascospores. There's these 5 different types. We have the simplest with no septation. We have singular septation, multiseptate, irregular septate, and this long, slender structure. And once again, these ascospores are going to be found within phylum Ascomycota.